fact, this work was developed it's part of the PhD study of Thomas, that is here. He was my student. And it's proposed by Carlos Fortaleza, that is a physician from medical school in Botucatu, and we have been working together for a while. So the idea is to really understand the movement of patients between two environments in the hospitals and also among hospitals, and how this is related to the infection of this kind of resistance infection, that the bacteria, or you can have also fungus, but we are talking about the bacteria, a specific kind of bacteria. So this is the idea. So just to think about the problem, so we are talking about hospital-acquired infections. So it means that the person, he get infection because he's in the hospital. And in general, this kind of infections is related to intensive care units. Is really the main place of the hospital where there is like high risk to acquire it. And this guy doesn't move. So think about that. Who is the vector of the spread of the infections? Is the healthcare that are touching him and touch a susceptible one, and they are the vector of the transmission. In fact, it's not like the people moving by themselves, okay? So this kind of thing is very important, because this kind of bacteria that we are talking about, they are resistant for antibiotics. So it's really like, again, in this kind of environment, intensive care units, there is a lot of pressure related to the use of bacteria or antibiotics. So this kind of bacteria coming from this kind of environment, and they are resistant, okay? And these kind of infections increase patient morbidity and mortality, and of course impose a lot of healthcare cost. I saw that in some cases it's like 20 times bigger than when the guy has this kind of infection than a normal guy for the healthcare system, okay? So these kind of infections, as I told, can occur on the level of hospital, because the patient is moving between two kinds of environments, the ward and the ICU environment, but also among hospitals, because you change patients among hospital. If he arrives in a small hospital and he needs some kind of procedure that this hospital is not able to do, they move that. So moving this guy, you are moving infection among hospital. So if you think about North America and Europe, between 5 and 10% of all hospitalizations result in this kind of infection, but we are here, no? Latin America, 40%, so it's really huge. And this is the area that Fortaleza works with. He's a specialist on that. And just to have an idea, I bring this kind of picture related to the infection that we want to model. And for example, it started to be observed in 1980s, okay? And we can see the introduction in the different countries come after. So this is, now it's like, there is like a tourism also related to the hospital stuff. So we move it between countries to make like treatments. So for example, if you think about this bacteria that I'm interested on in this work, it was detected in the United States in 1996. And in Brazil, this figure this is another kind of enzyme production in 2014 but in fact, since 2009, they are talking about detecting the KPC bacteria in patients in Brazil. So this is, okay? And this bacteria is really important to look at that, because the resistant gene can spread clonally when the bacteria produce a new bacteria by dividing herself, but also horizontal gene transfer. So she can promote bacteria that are susceptible. Doesn't need to be the same species to be like resistant, you know, like make this kind of change. And what we was trying to understand, it's really the role of patient movement inside of the hospital between these two environments that differ in the risk of acquiring the infections, and also among the hospitals in Brazil, okay? and we focus in this KBC bacteria. So the model was developed to take in account some characteristics of this in the Brazil hospitals population, let's say. And in the work, what I will try to show you is first that we were able to measure to have an expression for the R0 that we know from epidemiology, the number of secondary infections that we can have after the introduction of an infected individual in a susceptible population. So we were able to get this. We work with 3 kinds of scenarios. So I will show these in different scenarios. And also, these different scenarios is related to the link between hospital environments and also among hospitals. And we make some kind of sensitivity analysis related to R0 to the model input parameters to try to get some information about control in the sense of, okay, rand wash is a kind of control. So how important is that? Transfer between hospital settings and also among hospitals is important or not, and this can be a kind of control. So we make this kind of analysis. And one question that we are trying to deal with now is that thinking about the results that we get, we started to think about this kind of source and sink dynamics that is people know from ecology, in the sense that, okay, some hospitals is acting as source of infection, others like sink of infections, and if we try to classify them like that, can we really make like a better distribution in the sense of control money in a national level? So that's the idea, to try to combine this maybe with the topology of the network, and this can be a good way to think about control. So this is something that we are done now. So the information that we get, in the case of Brazil, there is not a national source of information in the sense of how patients are transferred between among hospitals. This is really local. Each hospital has this kind of base data, so it's hard at the moment to go and collect them. So we really propose some kind of theoretical network in the sense of movement among hospitals. If you go to Europe, for example, they really have this kind of information, okay? So here we have it, but it's really spread. So we did something theoretical in the sense of construct a network that we are trying to get some characteristics of this kind of network related to movement of patients. So the network that we have until now is like undirected weighted network, okay? And what we use is the location and the size of this hospital estimated by the number of beds that they have. So I will show what we get, okay? We exclude from this analysis some hospitals that the data set was not good, but it still be that this kind of database is really nice in the sense of which kind of hospital we have, number of beds, where it's located. So there is a huge of information related to that. And this is why the way that we try to construct the network, and was also based in some work that try to clustering them related to their characteristics. So we use this kind of information to think about the network. So what we did is that we connect hospitals that are geographically near, okay? But also we use the number of beds that they have as an indicator of if he's important or not in this kind of hierarchic network that we know that we have, okay? So that's the way that we connect them. A hospital is connected to the 8th one that's near him geographically. We will not move patients from one hospital to another one that's too far. We try to move them around. And also, of course, I will not move one patient to a hospital from one that he cannot be traced to another that he cannot be traced. So it's always this kind of hierarchic stuffs. And the result that we have for Brazil, it's like we have around 6,000 of hospitals classified as general ones that has no intensive care units, just wards. And we have what we call mixed hospitals that has regular wards and but also ICU facilities, okay? So this is the network that you can see, and classified it by the levels that we propose, like 4 levels that take in account the size of the hospital. If you think about the University of São Paulo Hospital, she is in this level, level 4, okay? So it's really like, can give us this kind of hierarchical stuff. So this is Brazil with the data that we could collect it. And we use a multi-patient model. There's like comments about that already. So each patch represents a hospital, and it's in the node of my network. And then I will show you, I have a system of ordinary differential equations that try to model transmit inside of the hospital. But this hospital is not an island. He's connected in following this topology that I show, the sense of network of hospitals. And they share, so there is movement of patients in the different settings in the hospital. So that's the idea. And so we have hospital, connection among them. We have connection inside of the hospital among these two kind of environments. And here that I comment to you that I choose to work with this kind of bacteria, KPC. And in the case of Brazil, it's not endemic in the population. You can find it just in the hospital. In the hospital, we have it, but not in the population. So in our model, I will not consider the arriving of patients from the community that is already infected. That is the idea, okay? This guy already infected, just coming from movement between hospitals, but not from community. So also, that the movement inside of the hospital can be in this kind of environments, that's the regular wards and ICU. And for this, I will show you that we use data from Botucatu Medical School. So the students of Carlos were able to collect it for many years. So we are using this kind of set of data collected in the hospital of Botucatu as something that, okay, occurs in the Brazil, let's say. And always also for the way that happened in Brazil, the patient leave the hospital always passing through the ward service. So we put this in the model, and moving out of the ICU just if you are dead, okay? Otherwise, you have to pass for the second environment. So we use this kind of characteristic that Fortaleza was really telling us how it works. And also that just mortality, because we are focused on here, we consider like a significant mortality rate just in this environment in the hospital. And also we put like 2 kinds of patients status that was colonized and susceptible, but also for the health work. I will show you. So we consider like colonized and susceptible. And once colonized, a patient remains in this epidemiological state until he leaves the hospital. So this is the consideration that we put in the model. And as I comment, transfer among hospitals are given by the Brazilian hospital networks. And again, I comment, the works can also be colonized or susceptible. And by, like, for example, they can revert their status with hygienic practices like rent washes. So this is the model. So we have ordinary differential equation system in each patch. That means each hospital. So just to think about, we have in the kind of intensive care units, 2 kinds of classification. The patient can be susceptible or colonized. I is related to the hospital. And in the other environment, that is ward service, he can also be susceptible or colonized. And for the healthcare works, they don't change environments in the hospital. So the ones that work in the ICU environment, they don't move to the ward. So this is, again, information that coming from Fortaleza, that he works in the
Works is just one hospital. Healthcare worker.
Well, this is not true, but we are not considering that they change hospital. But this is true in Brazil, that they really finish her turn in a hospital and move quickly to another one, but we are not considering this. Okay, so we really consider that they work in this hospital and in this environment. But this is true that they change hospital.
In one of the two, just in a specific environment?
Yes, yes.
Not both?
No, no. Inside of one hospital, if you think about one hospital, they don't change environments, the healthcare works. Okay, but as he comments, some of them finish their turn and move to another hospital. I don't think they change environment also, because in general they are specialized, but this kind of movement we didn't consider.
Visitors in the UCI, visitors from the patient?
No, we didn't consider this kind of stuffs, and also we didn't consider the colonization come from for example, the table or the bed, because this is not the case for these bacteria. So again, we use the information that we get from them. But also visitors, that's true that they come to the environment, but they are not really touching them. You know, it's like, because the idea is that, for example, in the ICU environment, in general, you are like, this kind of stuff, let's think that it comes from invasive procedures. So this kind of bacteria, they are opportunists, okay? So that's why maybe in general you don't have it, or your body is okay with that. You have it, but you are not sick, and you are not like making transmission. But the fact that you are in ICU service, and maybe they have to put something inside you, and then the way that this bacteria really go through your blood, and then you have problems. So that's why this kind of, it's really like health work, because they have to make, they have to, let's say, really touch the patient in the say that they, in a way that they can be colonized.
Okay. So your variables here are all numbers of patients and number of healthcare workers?
Yes.
So the equations are fully deterministic, there's no stochastic?
No, there is no stochastic, it's full deterministic equations, okay? Good? So this is the model that we have in each hospital. It's deterministic model. So, okay, I comment something about that. So some data coming for the hospital of Botucatu, okay, they collected there. Others data coming from the Brazilian Health Minister website. So it was the way that we parameterize the model and also make some, okay, what's the interval of variation that we can play with. And for example, there is some like Brazilian resolution related to the number of healthcare works that we have to have in each hospital. So we also play with this number and we get information from that. And also, for example, as I comment, the healthcare work, his shifts operate as 8-hour rotation. Again, maybe they went to the hospital, but we are not taking into account. And also we consider that the hand wash frequency has the same range that describe the contact frequency. And this kind of data we have in the hospital also. They make this kind of measure. They put someone to observe how many times they really wash their hands after touching a patient, but in the correct way, okay? It's not just, they really have to wash it correctly.
That's uniform in all hospitals. Botucatu is a reference hospital.
Yes, it's a hospital school. This is the kind of data that we have, so we play with that, say, okay, this is a picture of Brazil, but I agree with you, that's not, we don't have. So this is what we have. So we play with that. Using the data of Botucatu, we consider that this is representative for hospitals in Brazil. That was the idea. And thinking about the three kind of situations that I comment, like 3 scenarios to try to understand what is getting on. I forget to talk about the model, but we can move back a little just to show that, okay, this is patients moving out of these environments, movement among hospitals. And this is like arriving by moving patients among the hospitals. This is like moving from another environment. No, let me see. This is easy. So I move this. Okay, this guy move. Where is he? Okay, that's exactly. Maybe it was a good idea to put it the other way. So he moves from intensive unit care units to the hard ward part of the environment. So we are putting this movement, and something that, as I comment, people coming from the community, so this kind of data we make like estimation for the government size, and also mortality related just to this kind of environments, if you think this is what we consider. And the other one is here is like discharge, in the sense that he's okay, he can move out. So it's all the ingredients related to what I was talking, and also this kind of situation that this guy get colonized after being touched with people from healthcare works that touch them, okay? So the numbers of touch, the probability of transmission for each touch, and things like that. So this kind of first scenario, we were like trying to think that there is no change of environment, there is no change of patients among hospital. Okay, so it was really to understand the dynamic that we are getting. So in this case, we are able to get the disease-free equilibrium. So if you think about the system that we have before, you just have susceptible patients in the ICU service or in the ward servers, and also just susceptible for people that work in each kind of environment. So then you can use the next generation matrix to get the R0. I'm calling RU just to talk about one or another situation, but this is the R0 as the environments are disconnected, is the maximum value that we can get in each kind of environment. And things that are interesting at this point is that it really remembers us the kind of result that we have for vector transmission disease, in the sense that you need to touch, okay? So the work touch someone, she has to touch someone to be colonized and then touch another one that is susceptible, no? So this is something that we also get like similar in vector transmission disease, because they are acting as vector of the transmission. And something that it's like averted is that in general for vector-borne disease like dengue, you have the mosquito population over human population. And here is the opposite, because in general the number of touch is fixed. You know, they have to make some kind of movements in the same patient to take care of him. So what we can see is that, okay, this is the number of patients over the number of work people in that environment. So it's like if you increase the number of people in that environment, so they have to be like touching less, let's say, and then the disease fall down.
It's a kind of touching ratio.
Exactly. And also, of course, this is a threshold to tell us if the infection persists in the environment, in the sense of hospital, but also as we consider in this first scenario that the ward service is disconnected from ICU, it's the maximum of these two values that we can have in each environment. And it's really similar, the expression. So, and we also can think that we can have the disease in the hospital, but just in one environment, okay? So this is more or less what we get from that. And some comments that I already did is similar expression, what we can see in vector-borne disease. We are talking about vector transmitting the disease. This revert related to the fact that the ratio of the population is revert. So, for example, this we can go back to the literature and see that really other staffing is one of the major drives to transmission of this kind of bacteria, and we get it in the R0 value, okay? So that's what I comment. And this is the second scenario. So in the second scenario, we linked the two environments in the hospital, but we still make no movement of patients among hospitals, okay? So we...
Can I ask a question? You said that the reduced staff is responsible for this infection.
Increase
Is there
the...
a critical value of where the staff above that doesn't help you, but below, so that you could sort of come to a conclusion of what's the optimal level of staffing?
Yeah, you can really get this kind of stuff because we have like analytical expression for how R0 depend on this number. You can really give this kind of answer, given that we are talking about a deterministic model. No? So it's like, but yes, from this kind of situation, you can have it. And this is the nice part of having this kind of threshold, because you can say what kind of parameters are important in a positive way in the sense of decreasing transmission or in the negative way, and how to change it.
This is very nice, because in a certain way you want to optimize these numbers, right?
Yes,
And maybe
make it less than one.
And maybe going above a certain level stuff may even be negative. You have too many people there. So maybe you must have a number that you want to
Yes,
keep the
yes,
system.
yes. So this is something like nice, in my opinion, about working with deterministic models. You really can get expression and really get a lot of information for that. So that's what we are trying to do. So in this second environment, we can see that this, let's say, true thresholds related to each environment, they are combined to give the thresholds of the hospital. So that's what we are getting here. The expression is more complicated. If we just see, for example, the disease-free equilibrium, it depends on the steady state of the susceptible population. So you have not only parameters to play with, but also with this kind of numbers that we have in the steady states. So what I want to see is that when you make the sensitivity analysis, we really have more parameters to explore and to think about, okay? But we still have what we had before, the ratio between the two populations, double, touch, and we can think about, as you comment, which kind of parameter we can play with to reduce us to less than 1. And think about this second scenario. Again, this is a threshold to talk about infection persistent in the hospital or not. But we also can think about some linears in the sense that, for example, this is changing environments, the rate of change of environment inside of the hospital, no? And if this product go to 0, for example, we try to go back and think, okay, we have to recover the first scenario. So that's the idea, no? It's a double check. So this threshold goes to what we have before, that is maximal between the two environments. And also, if we have, for example, too much movement, that's the case in both directions. So what we get is that the thresholds, it's the sum of the two thresholds. In fact, the interpretation is that we cannot make distinction between the two environments. So that's what they are saying to us. But of course, the scenario is more complicated and has to be something between these two cases. And what we can see is what we comment here, that the infection dynamic is not trivial because it's between these two cases that we can understand and make interpretation. And also, but we can make a sensitive analysis and to say that, okay, the parameters that belong to the related to the ICU environment is really the most important in the sense of transmission in persistence. Because in this kind of environment is like really high risk. So this parameter, this is the important environment inside of the hospital. And also we can say, okay, I think it's more or less like this, okay? So the transmission is not trivial, And we can see here, for example, if you think about the red is disease persistence in the environment, well, the hospital, and blue is we don't have the disease. So if you think, for example, if the movement, the rate of movement between ICU and ward environment is here, is fixed, okay, and then I'm here, but I can think, and you can make like movement in the opposite way, and then I can come from the one situation when we have disease persistence, but then I don't have persistence infection, let's say, in the hospital anymore, no? So that's why this kind of movement can be think about a kind of control. So moving patient between inside of the hospital or between hospital can be think like a strategy of control. So that's the idea. And the last scenario is really more complicated. So I don't have like, I can still using the, I have to change, we change our notation, okay? Because then we have more than 6,000 of hospital connected, so you go to use it like vector notation, and you can have an explicit expression for the epidemic threshold, but of course I cannot make manipulations in the sense of getting it. What we did was numeric simulation, so that was the idea. So we have the expression, and we make numerical simulations and try to figure out the kind of results that coming from this connect giant network. And this scenario was explored through a sensitivity analysis, okay? And this was when we started to think about this kind of source and sink dynamics when we have the hospitals connected, that we try to think about that. And the idea is that, okay, if R0 from the hospital is less than 1, we will think him as a sink of infection. And if its R0 is bigger than 1, we can think about this hospital as a source of infection in this network. And what we get, for example, we make some parameters fixes because they were really like giving huge values for the sensitive analysis, so we took them out to keep just the ones that we can play with in the sense of control. So for example, hand wash, if you increase hand wash, you decrease the value of R0. We can see that here is negative, so it's in the other way. And transfer between hospitals is less important in this scenario of loud transmission, for example, and the movement inside of the hospital. So here, the interesting point is that in this scenario, you have like low transmission, and in this scenario, you have a situation of high transmission. And what we can see from the sensitive analysis that the order of importance related to the parameters changing amongst this kind of situation. That's coming as this idea of sink or source of infection. Because here, for example, if you think about this movement, it's really not important at all, okay? It was really not important because this is like, okay, this is the 0 for us. Less than that's not important. But if you have loud transmissions, it's really like as important as hand washing, okay? So to try to think about that, we also make this kind of histogram for the loud transmission situation. So this is so the idea is like, in general, we can measure the R0 individually for each hospital. We put like the ones that have ICU service, the one that doesn't have it. So what is the mean value if we think about this network? And how combine this to have the R0 of the network? You know, it's like, that's why when we started to think about this kind of source sink dynamics, because it was not really like make some kind of weight and then we get it. So the dynamic is different. Just to show you, for example, if you have low transmission, this is the minimal and maximal value that we get for each hospital in the network. This is the main value. And if we look for the entire network, so what we get is this range of values, you see, and also this kind of main value. No? So it's really like not trivial how this combination of sourcing things give us the dynamic of the network. That was the idea. And what else that can be interesting? In the case of Brazil, the movement is good in the sense that we don't have too much hospital with ICU service. So moving them among hospitals decrease the infection because of that, because this is the environment that really is a risk in the sense, so if you think about infection transmission. And this is something that highlights the importance that they know that they have to do that, but in practice they really don't know, is that when you receive a patient coming from low level, let's say like that, of hospital, you move him to a big hospital because he needs some treatments that the other one cannot provide, but the idea is that you have to move it back. But in practice, it doesn't happen too much, but what we are getting here is that this kind of rule that they have, if they do it, it's really nice in the sense of stop transmission among the hospital. So this kind of systems, that's not just Brazil that does, it's really good to make transmissions less among the hospitals, to stop it. And of course, hand wash is very important to stop transmission because the vector of the transmission is the people that work in the hospital. If they have a good hand wash, they will stop transmission also. And some conclusions about that. Let me see. Maybe I will jump this just because of time, but it's more or less what I have been talking about. And what I want to show a little that can be very nice in my opinion is that as I comment that we started to think about this kind of source and sink dynamics and how we can use this kind of information to think about control strategies in the sense of a national control strategies, not to really like share maybe the same kind of source then we talk about money between hospital or just base it on their size, but maybe just not base it in their topology because we have been talk about that, use the topology of the network to take decision. But what we have been looking here is that you can do better than that. And maybe the topology is not really, as Francisco commented, you know, you have different kind of measures related to the topology, so which one is good in the sense of taking decision. So it's in this direction that we are working on. And the idea is that can you use this knowledge to design and think about nice control strategies to stop transmission. And we are really looking state by state at the moment because the set of data is too big and the simulations take too much time to run. So this is for example, for São Paulo state. In the red, you have the source based in our criterion and the way that we have collected the parameters to estimate the parameters. And the blue one is the sink of infections. And the idea is that, okay, we have this network, we can talk about control, put control, units of control randomly in this network. So we can think about some kind of measure, degree centrality maybe, it's a good measure, so I take decision based on that. Or I take decision based in between centrality, or that's what we propose. We can take decision based in the R0 value of these hospitals, and maybe a combination of these is the better one. So the idea here that the kind of stuff that we did is like, okay, each unit of control reduction like 25% of the transmission in that hospital that receive it, and this is cumulative if you receive more. So this is the kind of result. For example, if you make the distribution think about random, so this is a proportion of reduction on infection individuals that you have. So we can see, for example, that the strategy to look for the R0 is really good in the sense of control, okay? But as I comment, maybe this is not true for all states in Brazil, and as I comment, there is like some works that talk about hospitals in Europe, and they could find the way that they make the networks different. So a lot of things we have to think about, how we define it network, how to construct it. Maybe for this kind of network that I construct, that I think it's important for the transmission of my disease, this is a good measure. But the way that we did here really show that this kind of decision based in the R0 measure is really good in the sense of control. So this is the idea. And this is just some kind of results that we are trying to understand why it's good in the sense of the number, let's say that the network community extractor. So here is like the cursor cluster. I just put them. It was not me, it was Thomas. So it's like classify. We have like just all these guys are 0 greater than 1, no? And the idea is that, okay, in red is when the network has R0 greater than 1. It's several simulations, okay? So each point is one simulation of set of parameters that he's collecting from the range of parameters that he has for each one. And if this guy, all of them are SIRS, okay? So I forget. So this is the idea that, for example, when the R0 of network is red, then then you go back and look at the topology. So what you have is that few number of clusters of SIRS, but they are large. So this is the idea. But if it's like the blue one that we think about sync, and then this R0 is like less than 1 of the network. So what you have there is like, this is the maximal size of the work, the cluster that you find in the network. So it's like smaller in general, but you have too much. So try really to understand the relation with the topology and the dynamic that we have, and try to make some analysis with this idea of clustering sources or syncing inside of this network. So that's something that we are still doing. And it was that.
There is something I didn't understood about the network. You have the network with the hospitals, but the hospital has a certain hierarchy from smaller to bigger.
To transfer patients.
To transfer patients, but there is not always the transfer is from the smaller to the bigger.
That's what we are. So, well, in fact, the recommendation is this kind of heifer and control heifer system. So I'm small, I send to you, you treat the guy, when everything is stable, you move back.
Okay.
So this is the idea. That's what, yes. So this is the recommendation. The practice is not like that. They just make one movement in general, and then you are okay, you leave. So we are considering what they are supposed to do because of the information that we don't have. Okay, but when you look, for example, that, as I comment, there is like other works in the literature talk about this, to use to look as a national system of control. The hospitals is a network. So if you go to small countries in Europe, they have this information. So they put like weights, and also they work with network that is direct because of this.
Very short and simple question. First, thank you for the presentation. Sorry. About the graph related to the sensitivity analysis, you showed two of them, but I maybe I lost, but I didn't understand which one represents, because there's no subtitle. And among the parameters, which one was statistically significant?
Okay, so I will move back. So is this one. So I have like one situation of low transmission because I set up this parameter, like low probability of transmission of the bacteria. And this is like high probability of transmission, okay? This is really the R0 of the network in this axis, okay? And this is the parameter that I use to measure, and I focus on the one that I can think about control. So it's like rand wash complex, or in the case is rates, no terms. And this is transfer among hospital and the transfer inside of the hospital. So this is something that I can manage. So that's why I use them here. And from the statistics that you asked me, this is my 0. Everything less than that is not significant. Can you get that? So for example, this guy, okay, look, is less than this. So this guy is not statistically significantly. I cannot talk about him in the sense of
Okay.
he's not playing a role in the...
Okay. This is a little bit different from the other articles I have read, because they usually use a star to...
Yes, you can use different stuffs.
Okay.
So this is like a dummy. It's a parameter that is not in your model, and you use like, okay, let's... It's not in my model. He's not supposed to make any kind of contribution. So it's a way to measure the ones that are important. And if it's like negative, it's the opposite. No, you increase them, decrease are 0. If it's positive, it's the same direction.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. We'll start again at 2, but please